I stood alone at my husband's memorial service, the only soul present amid a line of deserted benches that extended endlessly in front of me beside Jeremiah's polished mahogany coffin. Our kids, Kalen, along with his spouse, and Anaya, had opted for vacations and getaways rather than offering a last goodbye to the father who nurtured them. But hold on a second. If you're enjoying this, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us where you're tuning in from. It's amazing to see our tales reach across the globe. The funeral director, a fresh-faced fellow who appeared barely out of college, looked even more uncomfortable than I felt as he eyed the unoccupied spots. It was a dull, overcast Monday in mid-October in Atlanta, Georgia, with clouds that hovered uncertainly between drizzle and mere menace. Jeremiah despised hesitation like that. "Mrs. Hampton, should we hold off a bit longer?" he inquired, subtly eyeing his wristwatch. "Let's proceed," I answered. My tone came out steadier than I'd anticipated. Jeremiah couldn't stand postponements. The minister, someone who'd never crossed paths with my husband during his lifetime, droned on with vague praises of an upright soul and treasured recollections as I kept my gaze locked on the cluster of white lilies atop the coffin. Jeremiah would have favored something more modest, perhaps merely the rich crimson roses from our garden, the ones he tended diligently for 43 years. I took my seat by myself in the first row. The 5 vacant chairs around me echoed more sharply than any tribute speech. Our pair of offspring, their partners, our grandson, Damani, none of them there. Kalen had fired off a message the previous evening. "Sorry, Mom. Major conference in Miami. No way to rearrange. I'll ring you soon." Nothing more. No effort to adjust his plans for a proper farewell to his dad. I imagined him lounging in a lavish boardroom, glancing at the clock now and then, distantly aware of the ceremony unfolding miles distant. Anaya was even more callous. She skipped the courtesy of a note altogether. Her aide phoned to explain that Anaya was unavailable and unable to journey. Unavailable, as though this were casual supper plans, not the ultimate parting from the parent who'd borne her piggyback through her early years. Once the short ceremony wrapped up, I trailed the coffin to the cemetery. A chill gust nipped at my cheeks, yet tears didn't come. Not from a lack of sorrow, but because the past weeks had drained my supply dry. The coffin lowered into the ground, and I scattered a fistful of soil over it. The earth struck the timber with a muted thud, reminiscent of my solitary tread through the now vacant home. Back at the house, the very one where we'd reared our family and forged a shared existence for nearly 50 years, his slippers remained tucked by his favorite armchair. The television clicker sat precisely as he'd placed it. The quiet pressed in oppressively. I served myself a measure of our finest bourbon, the reserve we held for notable moments. This wasn't celebratory, yet it suited the mood. Seized by an urge I couldn't resist, I grabbed my cell and launched Instagram. Anaya's account popped up at the top of my stream. She'd shared a snapshot just 3 hours prior, right as her dad's burial unfolded. It showed her aboard a luxury boat, toasting with bubbly flutes aloft, beaming with joy. The words beneath declared, "Living my best life." I gulped down the lump in my throat. My girl hadn't been unavailable. She'd been reveling on a vessel while I laid her father to rest. I continued browsing. Kalen had uploaded a self-portrait from a meeting space, captioning it about sealing big contracts and forging valuable ties. Zero reference to his parent. No hint of mourning, like it was merely routine. I powered down the device and savored a deep draw of the whiskey. Hanging on the opposite wall was our picture from the 40th wedding milestone. Jeremiah and I grinned there, clasping hands amid the rose shrubs he'd set in when we first settled here. They burst with vivid scarlet in the image. These days, like him, they faded. Out loud, I resolved for the morrow. I'd reach out to Lawyer Owens. Lawyer Owens had handled our legal matters for more than 30 years. He'd prepared our estate plan only 2 years back when matters felt straightforward and equitable. An equal share to Kalen, an equal share to Anaya, plus a modest slice set aside for Damani, our sole grandkid. The residents left for the pair to divide or offload, the woodland retreat for their communal use. That evening, I lingered solo in the kitchen, the exact place where Jeremiah whipped up Sunday morning meals without exception. He'd always whipped up surplus flapjacks for the youngsters, long after they'd flown the nest. "One can't predict if they'll drop by," he'd remark with an optimistic grin. "They seldom did, except when seeking favors." I pulled open the cabinet drawer housing our vital papers. My fingertips skimmed the neatly filed packets, statements, titles, coverage forms, until locating the tan envelope marked Final Will and Testament. The paperwork Jeremiah and I had endorsed 2 years earlier now felt like an artifact from a bygone era, one where we truly thought our offspring gave a back in the United States, an era when obligation and affection felt intertwined. I shut the file and headed to our sleeping quarters. Jeremiah's medications remained on the bedside table. The physician had assured me it would be swift, yet it dragged on. It spanned half a year of gradual deterioration, endless medical trips, bursts of optimism shattered by crushing disappointment. During those 6 months, Kaylin showed up just twice, and Anayaya managed only a single visit, each time offering quick justifications tied to jobs, family obligations, and schedules. When Jeremiah ultimately slipped away, it happened on an ordinary Tuesday dawn. I clasped his hand tightly. He lifted his eyelids, offered a faint grin, and whispered, "Eliza, you've always been my favorite part." Then he departed. I contacted the children right away. Kaylin mentioned he'd arrive by the weekend. Anna vowed to catch the soonest plane, but neither made good on their promises. The following day, I reached out to Lawyer Owens. His assistant picked up, and upon recognizing my tone, her demeanor softened. "Miss Hampton, my sincerest sympathies. We've only just learned of Mr. Jeremiah's passing." "Thank you, Shondianda. I require a meeting with the lawyer soon. It's pressing." "He can fit you in tomorrow at 10 a.m. Does that suit?" "Ideal." That evening, rest eluded me, not due to the choice I'd settled on, but despite its firmness. For the initial time in many weeks, a sense of direction emerged, a sharp focus. It felt like Jeremiah stood beside me, giving a subtle nod of agreement. Lawyer Owens's workspace carried the scent of aged volumes and newly percolated brew. He rose as I stepped in, his expression conveying genuine regret. "Eliza, it's nice to have you here. I'm truly sorry about Jeremiah. He was a remarkable individual." "Thank you, counselor." Indeed, he was. I settled into the leather seat across from his workspace. "I wish to amend our estate plan." He inclined his head, expecting as much. Plenty of bereaved spouses had crossed his threshold with identical intentions. "I see. Do you have particular changes in mind?" "I intend to exclude Kaylin and Anaya entirely." This caught him off guard. He deliberately set aside his spectacles. "Entirely. All assets." "Yes, the residence, the retreat, the finances, the holdings. Direct them to Damani, your grandson." "Affirmative." Lawyer Owens cleared his voice. "Eliza, I recognize this is a trying period, but choices forged in sorrow might later." "I interred Jeremiah by myself," I cut in. My words stayed steady, yet resolute. Not one of our offspring showed up for the service. Anaya was out on a boat toasting with companions. Kaylin prioritized a work session he could have postponed without issue. In contrast, Damani checked in daily amid his grandfather's ordeal. He handled the yard work once Jeremiah weakened. He ferried me to the clinic on evenings when driving proved impossible for me. At merely 22, he possesses greater integrity than his parents put together. Lawyer Owens paused briefly. "I get it," he concluded. "We'll draft the updated papers. Be aware, though, your offspring could challenge this upon your death. Let them attempt it, but fortify it as securely as feasible. Set up a fund for Damani beyond his parents' reach." "That's doable." He jotted a few points. "Any stipulations on how Damani draws from it?" "Only that he can't claim the full sum until age 30. barring needs for schooling or health crises. Wise for someone so youthful. Lawyer Owens approved with a nod. I'll prepare it all for your approval by week's close. As I exited the building, a burden eased from my frame. This wasn't spite, it was fairness. It was safeguarding Jeremiah's remembrance through the sole means remaining, directing his heritage to one who genuinely cherished him. I strolled leisurely toward the vehicle, watching the passers-by on the sidewalk. A parent and her young daughter strolled past, sharing chuckles over a shared secret. No jealousy stirred in me, merely a serene grasp that familial bonds hold layers unseen in holiday snapshots. That night, for the first occasion since Jeremiah's departure, I skipped slipping into his worn pullover for sleep. I reclined in our shared space, now solely mine, and allowed the quiet to surround me. It had shifted from anguished hush to tranquil repose. Jeremiah often remarked, "Genuine devotion seeks no acclaim, yet merits honor." Our progeny had overlooked that truth, though I held fast to it. The documents received my signature on an overcast Thursday. Lawyer Owens observed as I guided the pen across the marked spots with steady resolve. Not a second of doubt arose. When your spouse's burial stands solitary while your kids share bubbly toasts online, paperwork loses its menace. "It's finalized," Lawyer Owens announced, collecting the sheets. "We'll handle it confidentially, but heads up. Eventually, Kaylin and Anaya will learn of it." "Understood," I responded, tucking the pen into my bag. "And once they do, I'll deliver the news myself." Departing the premises, an odd freedom washed over me. Not elation or retaliation, simply the shedding of a load. The load of sustaining a false image. The false image that my children remain the individuals Jeremiah and I once envisioned. Returning home, I unlocked a wardrobe untouched for months. Within lay, organized by year, these boxes held checks, statements from the bank, and various receipts. It was a detailed record not only of finances, but also of the one-sided kindness that defined my bond with my kids over so many years. I retrieved the file labeled Kaylin Business and Education. Within it lay a stack of costs that surpassed what countless folks make across an entire career. Fees for his MBA at a prestigious university far from home. The $70,000 poured into his debut venture, which crumbled in under 12 months. The $10,000 toward the deposit on that sprawling McMansion to wow potential customers. The luxury imported vehicle for maintaining the facade. Each time a demand arose, Jeremiah would scowl, yet he'd relent in the end. "After all, he's our boy," he'd remark. "Eventually, it'll click for him." But that moment never arrived. Anaya's file painted a similar picture, the lavish ceremony that ran the price of a modest apartment, the upgrades to the upscale apartment she earned after all her efforts, trips to the Maldives to unwind from the pressures, the elite academy for her boy, essential for his prospects ahead. Behind every ask lurked the unspoken vow of closer ties, frequent chats, deeper links, vows that faded the instant the funds transferred. What hit me hardest now, sifting through those files, wasn't the total sum, but the recurring theme. Gratitude was absent. Instead, there lingered an unwavering assumption that we'd forever step in to assist, as though the earnings from years of toil and frugality were merely an advance on their legacy. I shut the files and returned them to the storage unit, driven not by regret, but to safeguard them as proof, not for any legal battle, but for my inner self. That evening, the phone buzzed at 7:32 p.m. Demani's name lit up the display. "Grandma, mind if I swing by tomorrow? I've got some books Grandpa would have enjoyed, and, I'd like to share them with you." A knot formed in my throat. "Sure thing, sweetheart. Join me for lunch." The following day, I prepared lasagna, Jeremiah's go-to dish. Demani showed up right on time at midday, tote bag of secondhand volumes in hand, wearing his grandfather's soft, warm grin. We dined outdoors, chatting about everyday matters. He shared updates on his university life, the gig at the local bookshop, and his aspirations for advanced studies. His words carried genuine excitement, free from the desperate drive that defined his mom and dad. You see, he noted while dishing out extra greens, I often reflect on Grandpa's outlook on things. He used to insist that true achievement came from wanting less, not acquiring more. I beamed. That was pure Jeremiah. Your grandpa would approve of you, Damani. Really. His tone held a raw openness, echoing the kid he once was, craving affirmation without insisting on it. Absolutely. Post-meal, he volunteered to handle the cleanup. While wiping down the dishes, he brought up his interest in a fellowship for African American Lit Studies, though the expense had him hesitant. "What's the figure?" I inquired offhand. He quoted an amount barely a fraction, under 10%, of what his dad had sought for the most recent scheme. "Go for it," I said plainly. "But Grandma, it's pricey, and I get that." I cut in softly. "Who do you suppose your grandpa and I scrimped for all those years?" He paused, buffing a spotless dish. "For instances just like these," I went on, supporting those who cherish the chance. As he departed with the surplus lasagna I pressed on him, I lingered in the doorway, eyeing his worn-out car fade down the drive. The difference between him and his parents stood out starkly. Anaya rang the day after. It marked her initial contact since skipping the memorial service. "Mom." Her tone came off edgy. "Damani mentioned you're funding his lit fellowship. No greeting, no how do you do. Straight to the cash." "Morning to you as well, Anaya." "Pardon me," she muttered without real contrition. "I'm concerned, that's all. Dad's passing is fresh. You ought not to rush into big money moves." I inhaled steadily. "Truth is, I've handled a few key fiscal choices lately." "What? Like what?" Her concern rang hollow, not for my sake, but for how it might trim her share. "Why not drop by? We could discuss face to face." A beat of quiet. "Work swamped, Mom. You understand." "Oh, I do indeed." My reply stayed calm. "Same excuse you used to miss your dad's service, cruising a yacht with Bubbly." The line went still. "How'd you find out?" "Social media. Anaya, you shared pics right amid your father's committal." More quiet than a hurried justification. "Mom, it was messy. I was wrestling with feelings." "Save the backstory," I broke in. "Visit if you care to chat, or I'll figure you're occupied." Per the norm. I ended the call before her reply. My hands trembled, not in rage, but in liberation. Years of biting my tongue, of gazing in the opposite direction, justifying what can't be justified. At last, it was done. Colin arrived the following morning unannounced, just like he tended to when he had an agenda. His fancy imported ride swept into the driveway with that flashy spin that always left me uneasy. "Mom," he said, giving me a quick embrace. "You holding up? You seem worn out." "I'm okay, Colin. What's your reason for dropping by?" He scanned the place like he was appraising its value. "Anaya mentioned your chat. We're concerned about you." "Are you now?" "Sure," he replied, plopping down on the couch. The very one Jeremiah had occupied. "Dad's passing hit us all pretty hard." "I bet it did," I shot back, even though it looked like some folks coped better than the rest. To his credit, he appeared a bit guilty. "Listen, Mom, regarding the service, I couldn't skip that appointment. It was vital for work." "I get it." I took a seat opposite him. "The same venture your dad and I funded with $70,000 to get off the ground." He flinched, caught off guard by my blunt reference. I rarely brought up finances that way. That was ages ago. "True enough, just like the $120,000 for your home's initial payment and the $45,000 to wipe out your debts after your first divorce and the—" "Why drag this up today?" he cut in, clearly fidgeting. "Because your father is gone, Colin, and I'm doing a full reckoning, not only of our possessions but of our decisions too." He squirmed on the cushion. "What are you getting at, exactly?" "It means I've updated the will. You and Anaya are out." The stunned expression on his face might have been funny if it wasn't so foreseeable. Out. You can't possibly. I can, and I have. It all goes to Damani. Damani! His tone pitched higher. My nephew's basically still a boy. He's 22, a college grad no less, with more honesty in his pinky than you've shown over a lifetime. Colin rose abruptly, cheeks flushing. This isn't right. It's the morning messing with your head. You're not yourself. Actually, I said steadily, I'm clearer-headed than I've been in ages. Your father earned every bit of what we own through sweat and values. Values you and your sister appear to have misplaced. This stems from the burial, right? I've said sorry already. No, Colin. The burial was merely the full stop after a drawn-out tale. A pattern of grabbing without returning, expecting without gratitude, seeing your parents as an ATM rather than folks who cherished you without strings. He fell silent briefly, then switched tactics. Can we discuss this rationally? Perhaps reach some kind of compromise. Find a way that there's no deal to negotiate. It's set in stone. You'll rue this, he warned, snatching his keys. Anaya and I could challenge the will. Go ahead and try, I responded. It'll just confirm what I already know. He banged the door closed behind him. From the window, I saw him whip out his cell right away, no doubt dialing Anaya. I pictured the heated exchange, the blame game, the schemes to talk me around. That evening, for the first time since Jeremiah's death, I uncorked the premium bourbon we'd reserved for big moments. I filled a tumbler and carried it to the garden. The roses Jeremiah had nurtured with such devotion were beginning to droop as autumn approached, yet a handful of resilient blooms clung on, much like I did. Gazing at the yard, I recalled a phrase Jeremiah often shared. Love's akin to these roses, Eliza. It demands steady tending, occasional trimming, and occasionally enduring the cold season to flourish anew. Our cold season had come, and I was prepared to weather it. A peculiar quiet stretched over the next 3 days. No rings from Colin or Anaya, only messages from Damani checking if I wanted groceries from the store. The hush before the tempest, I mused as I tended the backyard greenery. The tempest blew in that Thursday when Anaya and her spouse, Malik, rolled up in their shiny BMW. She bypassed knocking entirely. She always did. Instead, she strode right inside, acting like she still owned a stake in the home. Mom, she announced, dumping her high-end purse on the foyer console. We have to discuss this. Malik lingered a bit back, uncomfortable as usual. He never quite meshed with our clan, constantly glued to his device at family meals, always glancing toward the exit as if plotting a getaway. Morning to you as well, Anaya, I said evenly, resuming my watering. Is what Colin said true? I set the can down and pivoted to meet her gaze. My daughter, so much like me in looks but worlds apart in essence. Her eyes mirroring my own, now squinted in distrust. Depends on his version. That you've cut us out. That you're leaving it all to Damani. This is crazy, Mom. I motioned for her to take a seat. She paused, then perched stiffly on the couch. Malik stayed on his feet, eyes on his screen. It's not crazy, Anaya. It's the outcome. Outcome of what? Of skipping a funeral. The chill in her words hit me hard like a sharp smack. It went beyond missing the service. It was the utter disregard for the seriousness of that situation still stung. Do you honestly believe it was only about the burial? She shifted, smoothing her pricey skirt as she crossed her legs. What more could it possibly involve? I drew in a steadying breath. Your dad endured illness for 6 months, Anaya. During those 6 months, you showed up just once, staying under 2 hours before inventing a work crisis to escape. 6 months passed without a single call from you to check on his condition, and after he died, you opted for a yacht excursion instead of bidding farewell. I was handling my sorrow in my personal manner, she countered. Not everybody processes loss identically. That's not processing loss at all. That's evading it. She glanced toward her spouse for backing, but he remained absorbed in his inbox. "What about Damani?" She pressed on. "He hardly knew Grandpa. Why should he inherit it all while we receive zilch?" The sheer unfairness in her words bordered on absurd. Damani stopped by his grandfather every week without fail. He read aloud to your father once his vision weakened. Damani managed the pill schedules. He ferried me to the clinic on evenings when driving overwhelmed me. He truly understood him, Anaya, and crucially, he showed real compassion. "This feels unjust," she declared, her tone sharpening. "We have a legal claim to that estate. It's rightfully ours. In truth, it's not. The property belongs to me outright now, and I alone determine its future recipients upon my death." Malik at last set aside his device, picking up on the escalating strain. "Ms. Hampton," he interjected, "Anaya merely fears for your well-being. Choices forged in mourning can sometimes be—" "Save your pretend empathy, Malik," I interrupted abruptly. "You two never fretted over me or Jeremiah unless it involved borrowing cash or seeking assistance." The ensuing quiet hung heavy in the air. Ani appeared truly stunned, not so much by the charge leveled, but by my finally voicing the ugly reality aloud. "How dare you utter that?" she murmured. "We're kin." "Kin." I responded quietly, yet resolutely. Kin make the effort to visit. Kin reach out with calls. Kin stand present through the toughest stretches, not merely surfacing for festive occasions and birthdays when presents are on offer. Anaya rose abruptly, cheeks flushed. "You're acting heartless. Father would despise this." "Your father," I answered evenly, "spent those 6 months in that very seat, yearning for one final glimpse from his kids. He departed this world let down. Don't presume to lecture me on his wishes." She grabbed her handbag with jerky motions. "This matter isn't settled, Mother. Kaylin has already consulted an attorney. You can't simply disown us this way. In fact, I can, and I already have." As they departed, I didn't bang the door shut. I eased it closed gently, with the same subdued resolve that had carried me since Jeremiah's passing. I wandered back to the garden and my greenery. The watering can lay abandoned where I dropped it. I completed tending the ailas, Jeremiah's cherished blooms, and settled into the swing chair. From within, the phone buzzed. I allowed it to divert to messages. Shortly after, it chimed once more, then repeatedly. At the 4th ring, I picked up. "Hello, Eliza. This is Charles." Our adjacent neighbor's tone carried clear concern. "Is all okay over there? I noticed Anaya storming from your place. Charles and his partner, Lillian, had resided beside us for more than 3 decades. They grasped our household dynamics like no one else. I'm okay, Charles. Merely resolving some lingering matters." "I get it," he replied, and from his inflection I could tell he truly comprehended. "Lillian and I were thinking, care to join us for supper this evening? Nothing elaborate, simply some companionship." I paused. Ever since Jeremiah left us, I'd shunned group outings, yet abruptly the notion of sharing space with longtime acquaintances, folks who genuinely appreciated Jeremiah and me, felt soothing. "I'd be delighted, Charles. Many thanks." That night, enveloped in the warm familiarity of the neighbor's home, amid the savory aroma of homemade gumbo wafting through, I recounted it all. The lone memorial service, the choice to revise the testament, the clashes with my offspring. Lillian clasped my hand over the tabletop. "You handled it as necessary, Eliza. Jeremiah would have grasped it." "Still, they're my kids," I whispered, at last releasing the tears I'd suppressed for ages. How did matters unravel so? Charles, ever the pragmatic sort, refilled our glasses with iced tea. At times, individuals veer onto routes beyond our ken. You and Jeremiah offered them every chance, boundless affection. How they squandered those gifts was their doing, not yours. Lillian agreed with a nod. Certain people fail to cherish their blessings until they're gone. And regarding Damani, I wondered aloud of my grandson. Am I choosing wisely? That young man keeps his wits about him, Charles affirmed. Jeremiah often noted as much. He wished only that Kaylin and Anaiah mirrored that lad more closely, he'd comment. I headed back home with a weight lifted from my shoulders, not owing to the choice per se, that resolve stood solid, but from unloading the load, from being truly listened to absent critique. Come dawn, an envelope arrived. I knew the script at once. From Kaylin, no digital note or quick ping, but actual penned correspondence. This marked a shift. I carried it outside alongside my morning brew. The paper felt substantial, official. I slid it open. I perused the note gradually. "Mom," it commenced. "Upon mulling over our discussion, I came to see that you could be correct regarding certain matters. In recent years, I haven't acted as the son I ought to have been toward you and Dad. Obligations at work, responsibilities, the demands of daily existence, they all accumulated relentlessly. Unbeknownst to me, I relegated you both to the sidelines. Concerning the funeral, no justification exists. I ought to have attended. I should have bid Dad a fitting farewell. That's a regret I'll bear indefinitely. Regarding the will, I grasp your dismay, painful as it is. Damani is a fine young man who merits acknowledgement. Perhaps we could discuss an allocation that addresses your worries without entirely excluding your own offspring. Kindly ponder it. We remain kin, regardless of all else. Affectionately, : I scanned the message thrice. It carried a conciliatory tone, bordering on authenticity, bordering on it. The reference to the allocation exposed the underlying intent, not true contrition, but bargaining. Nevertheless, it marked a beginning. I placed the note on the tabletop, offering no response. A handful of phrases on a page couldn't obliterate years of oversight, nor could one missive erase the vision of Jeremiah anticipating arrivals that never materialized. Damani arrived that afternoon, lugging a toolkit. "Grandma," I spotted the wobbly handrail on the rear deck. "Figured I'd repair it for you." I observed him laboring, his meticulous motions echoing Jeremiah's so vividly. The furrowed brow in focus, the double-checking before any slice. "Damani," I remarked once he completed the task, "I have something to share with you." We settled onto the freshly mended deck. I detailed the alteration to the will, my choice to bequeath it all to him. He remained quiet for an extended period, gaze locked on his own fingers. "Grandma," he uttered at last, "I haven't earned this. I didn't accomplish anything extraordinary." "That's precisely the reason you have earned it," I countered. "You acted without anticipating reward. You simply showed up out of genuine concern. Mom and Uncle Kalan will be outraged," he murmured. "They already were." He shook his head deliberately. I refused to spark further discord in the family. I clasped his hands in mine. They were laborers' hands, roughened on the palms, utterly unlike his parents' polished ones. "Damani, your grandfather constructed all we possess through integrity and diligence. He esteemed those who followed suit. You are the ideal successor to his legacy." He inclined his head, eyes glistening. "I'll strive not to disappoint you both. I trust you will succeed." After his departure, I lingered on the deck until twilight, swaying softly in the seat Jeremiah crafted long ago. The heavens shifted to hues of amber and violet, then grew darker. Initial stars emerged. "Am I choosing wisely, Jeremiah?" I queried the sky. The ensuing quietude conveyed serenity, as though the cosmos endorsed it. The next week brought a phone call from lawyer Owens. "Eliza, I'm merely updating you that Kalan contacted me." I exhaled deeply. What was his aim? To inquire whether the will had been formally submitted. Upon my affirmation that it had, he probed potential challenges. "And your response?" "The facts. It's your prerogative to allocate your estate freely, and the paperwork holds up legally. Appreciate it, counselor." He indicated he'd attempt another conversation with you, the attorney noted. He claims to have a mediation idea. I can picture that. I ended the call and sank into a chair at the kitchen table. the very one where Jeremiah and I sipped coffee each dawn for nearly 50 years, where the kids tackled assignments, where we marked birthdays, achievements, and career milestones. I retrieved a pad and began composing, not a testament, but a missive, a clarification, something for Kalan and Anaya to peruse once I'd departed, not a rebuke, but a record. My beloved children, I started, should these words find you, I've passed on. Know that my choice stemmed not from resentment or spite. I penned for hours, spilling onto the sheets years of affection, letdown, and ultimate reconciliation. I recounted the aspirations Jeremiah and I held for them, how we observed with mounting sorrow the rift forged by time and wealth, how ultimately it wasn't the wealth that counted, but the companionship, the moments together, the modest gestures that weave family bonds, and how, through it all, my love persisted. For a parent's devotion endures, even amid repeated hurts. I concluded the letter, enclosed it, and inscribed on the envelope, to be read upon my death. I stored it in the drawer where Jeremiah housed his vital papers. The chime sounded at 10 Gaur the following morning. Kalan waited on the doorstep, not clad in his typical executive attire, but in denim trousers and a plain top. He appeared nearly exposed. "Mom," he ventured, "might we converse?" I ushered him inside. He surveyed the space as if rediscovering it after ages. In a sense, maybe he was. "You've updated the drapes," he remarked. Indeed, 2 years back. He dipped his head, ill at ease. "May I take a seat?" He gestured toward the couch. He perched there rigidly, more like a guest than the boy who'd once dashed freely through these halls. "I got your letter," I started, "and I've consulted with Attorney Owens." "Mom, hold on before you go on. I get why you're upset. Anaya and I, we didn't turn out to be the kids you deserved." "No, you didn't," I replied flatly. My directness caught him off guard. He'd figured I'd downplay it, smooth over the edges like I used to. "Regarding the will," he pressed on, "I've come up with an idea that might suit us all, a middle ground." "Go ahead, I'm all ears." "Anaya and I both feel Damani should get his due. He stuck around when we bailed. So we're suggesting half for Damani and a quarter apiece for us." I studied my son, the very one I'd held close, fed and guided through his first steps and words. Now here he was, haggling over shares like we were sealing a corporate merger. "Kalan," I responded evenly, "this isn't up for bargaining. It's not some transaction. It's about recognizing who truly grasped the worth of what your father and I created together." "But we're your kids," he pushed back, an edge of irritation creeping into his tone. "That ought to mean something." "It does. That's why I've poured years into supporting you both, covering your MBA, Anaya's lavish home, the vehicles, the vacations, the crises. You've already claimed your portion, Colin, and then some." He parted his lips as if to argue, then snapped them shut. For an instant, I caught a flicker in his gaze. Not fury, but a dawning realization, like he was suddenly seeing the full weight of what he'd forfeited. Not the assets, but something infinitely deeper. "I screwed up big time, huh?" he muttered. I stayed silent. No response was necessary. He rose gradually. "I'll mull this over, Mom." I nodded as he reached the doorway. He hesitated. "I miss him," he whispered, meaning his father. "Only hit me how bad when it was too late." "I miss him every day," I said back. Once he'd gone, I returned to the veranda. The rose bushes were sprouting tender green buds on branches that had seemed lifeless just weeks before, hinting at revival post-trim. Maybe, I mused, a similar shift was budding in Kalan. Not sufficient to sway my ironclad choice, but enough to help him comprehend the true cost of his absence. And perhaps that insight was a bequest worth more than gold. Spring slipped in quietly, brushing the yard with fresh hues. The roses Jeremiah tended so devotedly burst into flower once more, tough and enduring just like him. I'd linger on the porch each morning, observing the hummingbirds and butterflies flit about. Those little wonders Jeremiah and I once highlighted to one another. 6 months had ticked by since I'd amended the will. 6 months of quiet stretches, tentative mending, stumbles, and fresh starts. Kaylin rang every week these days, inquiring about my well-being rather than finances. Chats that were short, occasionally strained, yet sincere. Anaya proved trickier. Post-clash, she'd withdrawn into wounded quietude. She'd fire off sporadic messages on mundane topics, steering clear of the will or her dad, as though ignoring it could make it vanish. Damani, though, had woven himself into my routine. He'd drop by for Sunday dinners, often with thoughtful tokens or reads. Not flashy, detached presents like his folks once offered, but items attuned to my tastes. An uncommon bloom for the plot, a handmade page marker, a cup etched with lines from a verse Jeremiah and I cherished. On that particular Sunday, he showed up clutching a hefty binder. "What's in there?" I wondered while we fixed the meal side by side. He grinned, that timid curve echoing Jeremiah so vividly. "A venture I hope to run by you prior to launching." Over the post-meal coffee, he laid out sheets across the surface, schematics, sketches, cost breakdowns. "Recall our chat about repurposing the residence and the lodge." He indicated the illustrations. "I've been mulling converting the lodge into a modest neighborhood book nook. The area's lacking one, and think of all the young ones nearby." I pored over the meticulous layouts, the thoughtfulness shining through each element. "And over here," he went on, revealing further visuals, "that's a future concept for the primary dwelling. Not immediately, mind you," he hastened to clarify. "Someday, though, a hub for elders, somewhere folks your age could gather, pick up skills, exchange know-how." I regarded my grandson, evolved from child to a fellow brimming with foresight and empathy. A fellow who viewed land not as prestige, but as a chance to spark real change. "Your granddad would have adored this," I murmured, throat tightening a bit. Damani beamed. He'd always quipped that an empty home squanders potential, right? The memory flooded back sharp. It was Jeremiah's go-to line, particularly once the young ones left and spaces echoed. "Damani, these concepts are inspiring, but they'll demand serious funds." He dipped his head. "True. I'm building my savings, plus I've got old classmates in community design ready to pitch in on the layouts." "Okay, why don't we get things rolling right away?" I suggested. He shot me a startled glance. "Right now? But don't you need Damani for that?" I cut in softly. "I'm pushing 80. I'd much prefer to witness these ideas come to life before I miss out on enjoying them." The grin that lit up his features made every dollar Jeremiah and I had scrimped together over the years feel like a smart investment. The next week, I brought Damani to the bank. We set up a shared account, and I moved over sufficient money to kick off the cabin build. Not the whole sum. I was still sharp enough to safeguard my future, but plenty to get his vision off the ground. The branch manager, who'd been acquainted with Jeremiah and me for ages, observed us with a sly, understanding grin. "Jeremiah would approve," he remarked, while we wrapped up the paperwork. "Absolutely," I replied. He often pointed out that cash is merely an instrument. What counts is the purpose behind its use. As we stepped out of the bank, Damani appeared daunted by the weight of it all. "Grandma, I swear I'll handle this properly. Not a single dollar will go to waste." I gave his arm a light pat. "I trust you, dear. That's precisely why we're moving forward." Word got back to Callan and Anaya quicker than anticipated. We hadn't shared the details, but in our tight-knit town, rumors spread like wildfire, especially ones tied to finances and building plans. Callan rang that evening. "Mom, I caught wind that you and Damani started a joint account at the bank. For the first time in ages, I had zero urge to defend or elaborate on my choices." "That's correct." A beat of silence. "Mind if I inquire about the purpose?" "It's to back a venture. Damani plans to transform the cabin into a neighborhood library." A deeper hush followed. "I see." His tone came across oddly restrained. Sounds like a solid concept. It was all his brainchild, entirely. All right, if documentation, approvals, or any legal hurdles crop up, count me in. The gesture took me aback. Appreciate it, Kellen. I'll pass that along to Damani. Once I set the phone down, I gazed at it for quite a while. That wasn't the response I'd braced for. Anaya arrived the following morning, solo. No Malik, no ostentatious SUV, just her pulling up in a modest, unassuming sedan I hadn't realized she even drove. "Mom," she said from the doorway, "could we chat?" I ushered her inside, a touch of fatigue in my step. Our prior encounter had been tense. She settled at the kitchen table, our go-to spot for weighty discussions. She seemed altered. Minimal cosmetics, straightforward hairstyle, attire far from lavish. "I got the scoop on Damani," she started, "the library in the cabin." I dipped my head, bracing for the inevitable flare-up. But she threw me off balance. I really believe it's a wonderful plan. Really," she affirmed with a nod, staring into the mug of coffee I'd handed her. "Dad used to mention something along those lines. You recall, he dreamed of setting up a spot for the local children to read." I did recall. Naturally, it was one of Jeremiah's aspirations that kept getting shelved for post-retirement after the kids graduated, once life slowed down. But that once never arrived. Damani held on to that memory. I noted how he truly listened when your father shared his thoughts. A flicker of regret shadowed Anaya's expression. I wish I'd listened more closely myself. We sat quietly briefly, the wall clock marking time with steady ticks. "I'm filing for divorce," she declared suddenly. "What?" She offered a melancholic smile. "Funny, right? Considering all you and Dad poured into that over-the-top ceremony, I was at a loss for words. Anaya and Malik had shared nearly 2 decades, yet contentment eluded them most days. What went wrong?" She exhaled heavily. It hit me that our life revolved around facades, an oversized home, a luxury vehicle, lavish soirees, but nothing substantial underneath. Her gaze locked onto mine. Ever since the will update, I've reflected deeply on priorities, on the people who count. "Mom, you hit the nail on the head." She brushed away a tear. I turned into the very sort Dad disapproved of, prioritizing possessions over relationships, equating achievement with what you own, rather than the bonds you nurture. She halted. "And I never got to bid him farewell. Change isn't out of reach for you yet, Anaya." She gave a distant smile. "Some things are beyond fixing. I can't make amends with Dad, but from now on, I can uphold the principles he cherished." That afternoon, I chauffeured her to the graveyard. We paused before Jeremiah's modest marker, freshened with the crimson roses I delivered each week. Anaya dropped to her knees, resting her palm on the stone like she sought a tangible link to the father gone too soon. I stepped away briefly, granting her the privacy she hadn't extended Jeremiah during his last days. From afar, I observed my daughter, bowed low, frame shaking with quiet cries. A delayed goodbye, yet maybe timely enough for her path to healing. Heading home, she inquired about Damani's endeavor. Any way I could pitch in. I've got skills in promotion. I could handle promotion, solicit book contributions. Damani would welcome that, I said. Why not reach out to him directly? Damani isn't one to harbor resentment, much like his grandfather. That next Sunday, after years apart, I finally had my kids and grandson gathered around the same dinner table. The atmosphere kicked off strained. Kaylin and Anaya seemed visibly uncomfortable. Damani kept things civil with careful courtesy. Yet as the food went around, a subtle change started to emerge. Colin inquired sincerely about the library intentions. Anaya chimed in with useful ideas for community engagement and raising funds. Damani paid attention, replied thoughtfully, and even chuckled at one of Colin's corny quips. It wasn't flawless. Certain scars ran too deep to mend over one sitting. Still, it marked a beginning. While sipping coffee out on the veranda, Kellen cleared his throat in that telltale way of his when anxiety hit. Addressing Damani, he said, "Your endeavor with Grandma is a brilliant concept, something Grandpa would have adored." Damani glanced over, caught off guard by the unforeseen praise. "Appreciate it, Uncle. If you require assistance on the legal front, like permits or whatever, count me in," Anaya chimed in. "And I can handle the promotion, building a site, handling social media buzz." Damani shot me a puzzled look amid this abrupt turnaround. I offered him a gentle, supportive nod. "That sounds wonderful," he eventually said. "I've got the overhaul slated for next month." Thus, on a balmy Sunday evening, a modest connection started forming among my offspring and my grandson. It fell short of full absolution or erasing old hurts, but it hinted at potential paths ahead. Once they'd all departed, I settled back on the porch, gazing at the garden Jeremiah and I had nurtured over decades. The roses were in full splendor, crimson and lively, defiantly exquisite. Do you view this as a fresh chapter or mere practicality? I wondered aloud to the breeze, picturing Jeremiah's response. I could nearly hear his wry grin as he tackled such ethical quandaries. "Perhaps it's a bit of each, Eliza, and perhaps the label doesn't count as long as folks evolve along the way." That evening, sleep came easier than it had in ages. The cabin revamp kicked off on a bright April Monday. Damani had gathered a compact crew, buddies from his architecture studies, nearby helpers, and unexpectedly, Colleen and Anaya. Kalen arrived ahead of schedule in denim and a faded tee, attire I hadn't realized he possessed. He'd secured the necessary construction approvals already, bypassing heaps of red tape. "Pulled some strings," he confessed when I probed. "It's the minimum I owe." Anaya pulled up shortly, laden with brews and baked goods for the group. Her locks were tied in a basic tail, sans her typical fancy do. She unpacked a computer and tidy files, too. "I've launched the online campaign," she detailed, displaying the page she'd built for the upcoming Jeremiah Hampton Community Library. "We've secured commitments for more than 500 volumes already." I observed my grown children laboring alongside Damani, Kalen steadying beams, Anaya rallying the helpers, each heeding their nephew's guidance with an uncharacteristic modesty. Flaws persisted. Tiffs flared at times, sharp glances when history surfaced, uneasy pauses whenever Jeremiah's name arose organically. Yet a fresh dynamic was budding. Mutual regard, maybe, or at minimum, comprehension. By day's close, we lounged on the porch, weary yet content. Kalen sported soil on his pricey slacks. Anaya had flecks of color in her tresses. Damani grinned more freely than he had in ages. "Grandpa would have cherished this site," he remarked, eyeing the framework where outdated panes had been swapped for expansive ones to invite abundant daylight. "Indeed, he would have," Kalen concurred, startling us all. He often spoke of crafting areas for personal development. Only lately have I grasped his intent. Anaya dipped her head in quiet accord, staring toward the fading sunset. Over the ensuing days, a pattern took hold. Kalen appeared on Saturdays and Sundays, hauling supplies he'd bargained down via professional ties. Anaya popped in nearly every day, managing contributions, planning benefit gatherings, stirring local fervor for the initiative. Damani drove it forward, steady and resolute, with a vivid picture of the venue's potential. I took it all in with swirling feelings, delight at the progress unfolding, admiration for Damani's growth, and a tangled sorrow seeing Kalin and Anaya at last embody the traits Jeremiah and I had long envisioned in them, far too delayed for him to behold. One evening, I discovered Anaya solo inside the cabin, sorting donated kids' reads. "Solid progress," I noted, eyeing the racks beginning to populate. She agreed, tracing fingers along the vivid covers. "You know what's odd? I'm finding more satisfaction here than in my day job." "That's hardly surprising," I said. "Your dad used to claim that contributing to others was the real reward. Hers delivers a joy that no amount of cash could ever match." She gazed off with a touch of longing. He'd shared that thought with me countless times. I simply hadn't paid attention back then. We paused in quiet for a bit. "Mom," she went on tentatively regarding the inheritance, "I get why you took that step, and it's fine. Honestly, Damani has earned it. He stuck around when the rest of us didn't." She thoughtfully placed a kid's storybook on the rack. "But I need you to understand. I'm not pursuing this for the sake of the will. I'm not angling to win back your favor in hopes you'll reconsider." "I know," I murmured gently, and in that instant, I knew it rang true. The fortune wasn't the main issue anymore. Perhaps it never truly was. It boiled down to acknowledgement, involvement, and common principles. "Dad would have been thrilled by this," she remarked, surveying the evolving area with all of us pitching in on a cause that counted. A few weeks on, Kalen experienced his own awakening. He'd shown up ahead of schedule one Saturday, hauling supplies for the fresh shelving units. "I offloaded the car," he declared offhandedly, while we handled the timber. "Which one?" I inquired, fully aware of the vehicle in question, the fancy import, the ride you and Dad always saw as over the top. I halted my task. "Why'd you do it?" He lifted his shoulders. Yet that contrived nonchalance couldn't mask the feelings in his gaze. I came to see I didn't require it. It was mostly about showing off to folks rather than any genuine need. He hesitated. "I put part of the proceeds towards starting a scholarship program at the local community college. In Dad's honor," I gazed at my son, this grown man who'd appeared adrift from the principles we'd instilled in him for years, and caught glimpses of the original Kalen surfacing once more. The kid who'd once handed over his whole pocket money so a schoolmate could afford meds for his ailing mom. The teen who'd devoted evenings instructing elders on computer basics. "Your dad would have beamed with pride," I stated plainly. Damani appeared the most taken aback by the slow shift in his aunts and uncles. One afternoon, as we toiled side by side in the garden encircling the library, he expressed his bewilderment. "Grandma, it doesn't make sense to me. Just 6 months back, they hardly dropped by. These days, they're showing up nearly daily to lend a hand and pitch in. What's flipped?" I pondered briefly before responding, my fingers occupied yanking out weeds. "Folks can wander off course at times," I said at last. "They become consumed pursuing what they believe counts: wealth, prestige, influence, overlooking the real essentials. And occasionally, it requires a major jolt to bring it home. Something like Grandpa's passing and you altering the will, perhaps. Or it could be something more straightforward. Maybe witnessing you, the younger crowd, embracing alternative ideals and demonstrating a fresh route." He mulled it over wordlessly, keeping at the task of scooping out spots for the blooming bushes that would line the walkway to the door. "Should I believe this shift is for real?" he wondered eventually. "That it's sincere?" I eyed my grandson, so youthful but already armed with the insight to probe intentions and dig for realities beneath the surface. "Believe yet observe," I counseled. "Time uncovers the authenticity of intentions more reliably than mere promises." 2 months into the overhaul, the Jeremiah Hampton Community Library neared completion. Racks brimmed with gifted and purchased volumes, surfaces bore new coats of gentle hues, and study spots were placed wisely to capture the sunlight. The debut event was slated for a Saturday in June. Anea had handled all the details: invites to locals, press from nearby outlets, a light brunch for early arrivals. Come the dawn of launch day, I reached the cabin at first light. I craved a quiet spell in that haven before crowds and chatter overtook it. Sunbeams poured via the wide panes, casting vivid designs across the revived wooden planks. The units, certain ones crafted from salvaged timber of the old building, formed looping rings. Damani's notion for those cozy exploration corners, as he'd dubbed them. Dominating one wall was a mounted photo of Jeremiah from long ago, amid his plants. He grinned toward the lens, clutching a tool in one grip and a volume in the other. Beneath hung a modest inscription, in tribute to Jeremiah Hampton, who held that books and gardens nurture where aspirations flourish. Quiet tears traced my cheeks. Jeremiah would have cherished beholding this. He would have savored each element, every deliberate selection. He's beholding it, you realize. Damani's tone startled me. He'd slipped in, unnoticed, clad in a crisp button-up and pressed trousers for the event. In a sense, he's present. I dipped my head, unable to voice a response. Damani drew near, draping his arm over my shoulders. I couldn't have pulled this off alone, Grandma. It wasn't solely me, Damani. It was your drive, your efforts. He grinned, that grin forever evoking his grandfather so vividly. Grandma. I managed it only thanks to what you and Grandpa instilled about true priorities and your boldness in rendering a hard decision when the moment called for it. Kaylin and Anaya showed up side by side, their anxiety plain to see. He hauled in a crate filled with hefty volumes on commerce for the career area. Not those superficial guides to instant riches he'd once devoured, but serious tomes exploring corporate morality and civic duty. She carried vibrant blooms to grace the surfaces and a thick, bound journal in fine leather. This is for visitors to sign, she clarified, flipping open the empty sheets meant to chronicle the venue's origins right from the start. The launch party surpassed every hope. Crowds from the neighborhood poured in. Parents with toddlers, adolescents, elders. The former town educator from the library stepped forward to coach helpers. Some educators suggested launching a post-class literacy initiative. Amid the festivities, I spotted Colin deeply engaged in discussion with several youths regarding career guidance initiatives. Anaya busied herself compiling names for reading session rotations. Damani moved about the room, facilitating introductions, linking hobbies, fostering bonds. Our enduring neighbors, Charles and Lillian, came over to chat with me. Jeremiah would have been grinning ear to ear, Lillian remarked, taking in the lively atmosphere. Absolutely, he would have, I concurred. Ever notice something intriguing? Charles murmured, nodding subtly toward Colin and Anaya. They appear transformed, reminiscent of their youthful selves. He was spot on. A certain buoyancy enveloped them, unseen for years, a genuineness overshadowed by pursuits of status and wealth for far too long. At times, I responded, we overlook the essentials, and at others, fortunately, we rediscover our path. As the evening wound down and visitors departed, I joined my kids and grandson on the modest terrace at the library's rear, where Damani had established a floral patch of roses to commemorate his grandfather. Callan lifted a tumbler of chilled tea. He'd quit liquor not long before, yet another unexpected shift. To Jeremiah, he suggested, the one who imparted lessons beyond our recognition. To Jeremiah, we echoed together, heading back that night. Kaylin, Anaya, Damani, and myself, the vibe shifted subtly, short of total harmony. Certain scars ran too profound for complete mending, yet it held a sense of comprehension, of fresh admiration. We settled on the veranda, much like in the days when the children were young and existence felt less complicated. The evening air hung mild, infused with scents of roses and jasmine. We conversed on light topics, the forecast, local folks, upcoming library ideas. Then Callan cleared his voice, his usual signal for weighty words. Mom, he started, over these past months, I've reflected deeply on Dad, on our paths, on the Testament. I stiffened right away. Was he circling back to challenge it after all we'd achieved? Callan, I began, though he gestured for silence. Just hear me out. It's not your assumption. He inhaled steadily. I need to admit you were correct on all counts. Anaya and I failed to uphold what you and Dad cherished. We absented ourselves when duty called, and your choice was the just one. I gazed at my boy, my astonishment undisguised. That's right, Anaya chimed in. Damani merits every provision you outlined. He grasps the essence of your shared legacy, beyond mere funds, its deeper significance. Damani shifted uneasily at the turn. No need to dwell on this. But there is, Callan pressed, to air it out fully. Mom, understand we honor your call. We'll never dispute it. And none of this, the library, our involvement, stems from greed or legacy claims. It's because we've at last comprehended what Dad endeavored to instill throughout our lives. Anaya concluded that real worth lies not in possessions, but in legacies crafted, ties forged, positive impacts made. I regarded my grown offspring, who had seemed so distant for ages, and detected traces of Jeremiah within them, flawed, incomplete, yet engaged. Your dad would approve of you in this moment, I stated, clasping their hands. And so do I. That evening, once the others had gone and silence returned, I lingered in the chamber I'd occupied with Jeremiah for years, retrieving the missive I'd composed for the children to be read post-mortem. I perused it once more, the sentiments of regret, the arduous rationale, the enduring affection amid it all. Those held firm when penned. Yet now they felt tied to another era, another iteration of us. I tucked the note away in the compartment. Perhaps someday I'd revise it, or perhaps it had outlived its purpose. Certain realities require no ink. They manifest in deeds, decisions, everyday compassion. Jeremiah grasped that eternally, and at last his offspring might be grasping it as well. The inaugural anniversary of Jeremiah's passing coincided with autumn's onset. The foliage glowed in the amber tones he cherished, while the breeze bore that distinctive blend of wistfulness. The crisp allure of October's scenery enveloped everything. Our neighborhood library had exceeded even our wildest dreams in popularity. Children flocked there every afternoon once classes ended. Older folks came together for reading groups. Young adults discovered a peaceful spot for homework. Damani devoted nearly all his spare hours to the place, overseeing activities, guiding helpers, and breathing energy into the dream we'd first imagined. Kaylin and Anaya stayed engaged too, contributing in their distinctive styles. Kaylin launched a career guidance initiative for underprivileged teens, tapping his corporate network to unlock opportunities that were typically out of reach. Anaya handled charity drives, securing the funds needed for the library's ongoing expansion. On the anniversary morning, I rose with the dawn. The routine ingrained from years alongside Jeremiah, he who cherished those early light shows, still guided my rhythm. I brewed some tea and settled on the veranda, observing the horizon brighten bit by bit. "A full year now, Jeremiah," I whispered to the fresh dawn breeze. "It seems both endless and fleeting all at once." I'd intended to visit the gravesite by myself. I kept the occasion from the kids, sparing them any sense of duty. Certain paths demand solo travel. Yet as I prepared to depart, the noise of vehicles pulling up drew my eye. Peering out, I spotted Kaylin emerging from his ride, not the sleek foreign import anymore, but an unpretentious local make. From the vehicle trailing his, Anaya and Damani alighted as a pair. I swung the door wide before their knock. "We figured you could use some support this morning," Damani said, clutching a bunch of those scarlet roses Jeremiah once tended so carefully. I gazed at my grown children clad in subdued attire, their faces showing a deep grasp of the day's weight. "That sounds perfect," I answered plainly. The burial ground lay serene under the fall sunlight. Faded foliage swirled gently across the earth in the soft wind. We proceeded as a group to Jeremiah's plot, a modest marker just as he'd preferred, bearing only his name and the span of years that defined his earthly stay. Damani arranged the blooms with care. Kaylin added a little pebble atop the stone, a ritual picked up from his newfound explorations of faith. Anaya carried a volume of poems Jeremiah treasured. She flipped it open and recited passages in a hushed tone. I lingered slightly removed, taking in how my offspring and grandchild honored the figure who'd touched our lives so uniquely and profoundly. Once Anaya concluded, Kaylin drew near the marker. "Father," he murmured, his tone gentle yet resolute. "It required ages for me to grasp the lessons you imparted on real priorities, honesty attentiveness, the essence of being. He halted, steadying himself. I realize it's overdue to express this, but I trust that from wherever you watch, you notice my efforts to improve, to become the man you envisioned. Anaya moved forward next. "Dad," she said, her words quivering just a touch, "your absence aches terribly. I long for your tales, your chuckles, your counsel, even the wisdom I feign to dismiss." Tears welled as she grinned faintly. "Gratitude for persisting in belief in me, despite my apparent rejection of all you held dear." Damani went last. He offered no audible words. Instead, he dropped to his knees and stayed quiet for an extended stretch, palm pressed to the stone, like forging a tangible link to his grandfather. Rising, I saw he'd deposited a tiny item there, the library's key. At length, I stepped up. My kids and grandson retreated a bit, allowing me solitude. "Jeremiah," I breathed, lowering myself awkwardly. Age was taxing my mobility more these days. "See the changes since you left. Hardly what we foresaw, right? Existence rarely follows script." My fingers brushed the chilled surface. Yet perhaps this path suits us finer. Perhaps the jolt was essential to rediscover our direction. I cherish you, eternally. As we gathered to head toward the vehicles, Kaylin paused before suggesting, "Mother, we want to mark the day meaningfully, a tribute to Father's legacy, joyful, not mournful, honoring his impact on us all." His forwardness caught me off guard. "What's your plan?" "A shared meal at home, all of us united," Anaya chimed in. "We'll handle the cooking if you agree." The notion of my seldom culinary family, accustomed to little beyond quick-boxed pasta, crafting a feast for their dad's memory, stirred something profound in me. "Absolutely," I said. He'd approve wholeheartedly. That evening, the kitchen buzzed with activity unseen for ages. My brood collaborated, clumsy yet resolute, recreating Jeremiah's beloved recipes. Kaylin experimented to match his dad's signature glaze for the ribs. Anaya wrestled with the recipe for the dessert bread he savored. Damani directed the operation, maintaining a semblance of order amid the lively disorder. I perched at the table, observing the heartfelt pandemonium with a quiet smile. Jeremiah would have cherished this scene, the chaos, the bursts of laughter over mishaps, the tiny triumphs when things turned out okay. "Dad always insisted the meal didn't have to be flawless," Anaya remarked, eyeing her uneven bread pudding with a discerning gaze. "As long as it was prepared with heart and enjoyed together," Kaylin chimed in. Once we gathered around the table for the meal, adorned with our finest china, the set Jeremiah and I got for our wedding and seldom touched, I sensed a wholeness that had eluded me for ages. Kaylin filled glasses with water and lifted his. "To Jeremiah Hampton," he toasted, "a father, grandfather, spouse, guide, the one who showed us what integrity really means, even if we tuned him out." "To Jeremiah," we echoed together. The dishes weren't impeccable. The gravy came out overly seasoned, the pudding a bit mushy. Yet that evening, each mouthful felt like the finest feast I'd ever had. Talk meandered effortlessly, with tales of Jeremiah surfacing on their own. Recollections I'd forgotten over time. Kaylin recalled how his dad guided him through learning to cycle. Anaya described the day Jeremiah assisted her in constructing a backyard fort. Damani shared stories from their joint angling outings. "Recall when Dad figured we all ought to master fixing a flat?" Anaya inquired, chuckling. "He let the air out on purpose and had us swap the tire in turns, stopwatch in hand." Kaylin chuckled. "I stunk at it. Took me nearly 60 minutes, and he waited calmly, offering tips only when asked, never jumping in." Anaya wrapped up. "He believed hands-on abilities mattered as much as any diploma." It struck me with wonder that we were actually chuckling now. Not mere courteous grins, but real, hearty laughs, reliving joyful moments rather than dwelling on the void. Post-dessert, Damani hesitated before speaking up. "I've got something to share with everyone." He stepped away for a moment, coming back with a plainly wrapped rectangular box. "This is something I've been crafting," he said, passing it to me for the occasion. I peeled back the paper slowly, uncovering a leather-covered volume etched with modest gold script. Jeremiah Hampton, A Life of Purpose. My hands shook as I flipped it open. Inside lay a thoughtfully assembled chronicle, brimming with faded photos, snippets from correspondence, articles on Jeremiah's local initiatives, and accounts from acquaintances, locals and folks whose paths he'd brightened. Where on earth did you gather all this? I wondered aloud, awed by the depth. Uncle Kalen reached out to Grandpa's former colleagues, Damani replied. Aunt Anaya spoke with neighbors and pals. I merely assembled it. I leafed through, soaking in snapshots of a fulfilling existence. Jeremiah as a youth, beaming beside our battered second-hand vehicle, acquired through hard-earned scrimps. Him hoisting young Kayleen piggyback style, guiding Anaya in sowing garden sprouts, the two of us marking our 40th anniversary. Then, nearing the end, an unforeseen addition appeared. Fresh images. The neighborhood library taking shape in phases, Kaylin coaching kids in the career workshop, Anaya sorting donated volumes, Damani engaging little ones at read-aloud events. The closing spread held one photo. Our quartet, me, Kaylin, Anaya, and Damani, beaming before the library at its debut, beneath the dedication bearing Jeremiah's name. Underneath, a straightforward note. The legacy endures. I shut the volume, tears streaming unchecked. Not from sorrow, but thankfulness, an awareness that amid the sidetracks and stumbles, a core essence had endured and been handed down. Kaylin and Anaya drew near, each resting a hand on my shoulder. "Mom," Kaylin murmured gently, "we realize no gesture can erase our absence at Dad's passing, or those times we were home in body, but distant in spirit. Still, we hope you see," Anaya went on, "that we've come to grasp what you both strive to impart through the years, the heart of what counts." I gazed at my grown offspring, who once seemed so remote, and at last spotted traces of Jeremiah within them, imperfect, incomplete, yet undeniably there. "Your dad would beam with pride at you all now," I told them, clasping their hands. "And I do, too." That evening, once the others departed and silence settled over the home once more, I lingered in the bedroom Jeremiah and I had occupied for decades. From the drawer, I retrieved the note I'd penned for the kids, meant for after my time. I scanned it anew. The expressions of letdown, the tough clarifications, the enduring affection amid it all, those rang true back then. But today they felt tied to another era, another phase of our lives. I refolded the page and returned it. Perhaps someday I'd revise it. Or perhaps it held no relevance anymore. Certain realities don't require ink and page. They thrive in deeds, in decisions. Through everyday acts of compassion, Jeremiah had always understood that truth. And now, at last, his kids might be catching on as well. What did you think of the tale? And where are you tuning in from? Which town? Join me down in the comments section. If the story resonated with you, feel free to show some love with a super thanks. It helps me share even more tales like this one. A huge thanks for your kind backing. I can't wait to hear your thoughts on it below. Right now on your screen, check out these two fresh personal narratives that I totally endorse. My channel's packed with plenty more. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Catch you next time for another heartfelt yarn, full of warmth and admiration.